Hi, I'm Pete Holloway. I'm a retired financial advisor and a retired certified financial planner. And as always, it's my great pleasure to welcome you to On Money. We have a very special guest today, Ralph Baxter. He was raised in West Virginia in Wetzel County, moved around, went to Stanford, got his degree, undergraduate degree in history, a master's in education from Catholic University, and his law degree from the University of Virginia. In 1974, he joined Orrick and ended up as the chairman and CEO of the company. How do we know his name? He's the person primarily responsible for bringing the Orrick office to Wheeling, West Virginia. We really want to thank you for that because it's been a great blessing for this town. He's the father of 4 children ranging in ages from 26 to 49. Again, I want to thank you very much for being with us. You're a hitter. We're not used to it. So tell us about your career in some detail.
Well, first of all, Pete, it's great to be here. Thank you for having me. I love what we've been able to do with Orrick here in Wheeling. I was a lawyer in my career for the first 40 years of my career.
Did you have a special niche?
Yeah, I was an employment lawyer. I advised companies in how to comply with the law and make the decisions they wanted to make in a way that complied with the law.
Wow.
So I started off as a labor lawyer, and over time that morphed into employment law as the law got more complicated. But when I think about my career, and I had a wonderful career, I was blessed to have a wonderful, interesting career, still do. I deny being retired. It all started really for me with a public education. And I'm a big believer in the importance of public education. And I'm an example here in West Virginia of what happens when we have a robust public education system. I learned to read here, of course, and all the fundamentals of arithmetic and everything. But I had a teacher in the 4th grade whose name was Mrs. Tucci. And she opened the windows on the world for me. And sitting there in that classroom, by then we lived in Weirton at the Edgewood Elementary School, and reading about other countries and reading about history, it opened my eyes to a world well beyond West Virginia, which at that point I'd really never been anywhere else in my life. But I had the good fortune to have a first-rate education starting here in West Virginia, and then at Stanford University. But my first experience in the world of work was being a public school teacher in Washington, D.C. So I taught 3 years at the Scott Montgomery Elementary School at 5th and P Northwest, Washington, D.C., fresh out of college, and learned a lot of things that you learn when you first work, a lot of the responsibilities. But I also learned how to over time, how to motivate children to learn, how to help children who don't have a tradition of education in their homes. Because the neighborhood where I was, a lot of the children came from homes that didn't have an orientation to education, how to motivate them to learn, and the joy of teaching, and a lot of other lessons. In fact, a lot of the lessons I learned in teaching the 6th grade helped me when I later tried cases and negotiated agreements with
people. There's a lesson there, and I'm not sure what it is.
Well, one of the lessons is the shorthand of an idea about juries is that juries consume the information you're trying to share with them at a level of about a 12-year-old person. So if you can try your case to a 6th grade class, you got a pretty good chance trying it to a regular jury. But anyway, and then I went to law school and I became a lawyer. Joined the Orrick firm when it was a regional firm in San Francisco. I was the 64th lawyer. The firm was founded in 1863, the same year the state of West Virginia became a state. But it was the law was very different when I graduated from law school. So most firms were regional. There were Pittsburgh firms and Boston firms and so on. And this was a San Francisco firm. And then over time, the firm, as a lot of the great firms around the country, got larger. But then I had the good fortune to be elected chairman of the firm at a time when we really needed to make change. We needed to adapt faster to a changing world. And so we did. And over the time that I was blessed to run the firm, we grew it to over 1,000 lawyers with 25 offices around the world, with the largest office being in New York, and did a lot of interesting things, and really a lot of interesting things. But the thing that to me will always be the most interesting thing we did, and the most meaningful thing that we did, was opening our Global Operations Center here in Wheeling, West Virginia.
Why? Yeah, in Wheeling, we are very down on ourselves, unfortunately, all the time. So
Yeah.
people out there say, what? Why is it so important?
Yeah, and we should not be down on ourselves in Wheeling
Exactly.
or in West Virginia. It's a way of thinking people have, but it's not. We're better than we think.
Oh, yeah.
So what happened? I was sitting there in San Francisco, in my office, and the costs of doing business, even then, and this was 1999, the cost of doing business were getting just astronomical in places like San Francisco. And so I thought, we can do this less expensively, because by then the technology permitted you to do certain kinds of work, information kinds of work, in different locations at the same time, so that people didn't all have to be in the same place. So why couldn't we move some of the work that we did in San Francisco, in New York, in Tokyo, wherever we were doing it? Why couldn't we do that in one place where the costs were lower? So I set out on a mission to see if we could figure that out. It was, yes, we could, and the technology would work and so on. So where shall we do it? And initially I thought, well, let's find a place that would like to have us and that will be welcoming and collaborate with us to create a center. And I thought, literally, I know a place that has lots of really smart, hardworking people where there are not as many jobs as there once were. Maybe, that place being West Virginia, where I grew up, maybe West Virginia would like to have us. So I tried to get a meeting with somebody in government in West Virginia to test this idea. Well, that was not as easy as I thought it would be. And I ended up talking to a congressman who I'd never heard of. His name was Bob Wise. And Bob Wise was, I think that was then the 2nd district or whatever it was, the district he had in the middle of the state. And so I got this meeting, and I go in expecting to meet some beefy politician who will then turn me over to a staffer and we'll talk. But it wasn't like that. It was Bob Wise that everybody in West Virginia came to know, in shirt sleeves, fit, runner, and he thought about this idea. And yes, we'd like to have you in West Virginia, and I think the idea is better than you think it is, because I was thinking mainly about saving money. Bob Wise had said, well, yes, you'll save money, but you can do way more than that. Why, you can end up with a better match of the people to the jobs. You'll have put everything in one place. There'll be synergies among the functions that you bring here. It's going to be great. And I walked out of that meeting thinking, wow, this really is a better idea, and West Virginia would be a good place to put it. But the story of the center is importantly for West Virginia. Anyone watching from West Virginia, we didn't just pick it because I had grown up here, or because I still had relatives here, which was, some people thought that was my motivation, but it wasn't. But we then did a national search. Once we knew we had a good idea that somebody would be interested in, we did a national search, and we considered places all over the continental 48, and got into pretty deep conversations with Tulsa, Oklahoma, and San Antonio, Texas, Nashville, Tennessee, as well as West Virginia. We looked at other places, but those were all people that we got serious with, and we chose West Virginia in the end because we thought it had the best mix of all the things we were looking for. And we can talk about that a little bit, about the economic opportunities for West Virginia. But we thought all in, it was the best mix of all of the factors we cared about over all of the other places. Importantly in this story, one of the reasons was how attentive Bob Wise was, because he had gone on to become governor by the time we were making the decision. And he was very focused on this, and he saw to it that the Department of Commerce and the people in Charleston were focused on it. But the other person was Nick Sparshane, who was mayor at the time. And he came all the way out to San Francisco to meet with me in person to tell me how important this would be to the city of Wheeling, and how if we chose Wheeling, then I could be comfortable that the city would support us, that the local universities would support us, which turned out to be true. Everything Nick said was true. And so, and it made an impact. We really concluded, and this is important for future economic development in West Virginia, we concluded from all of our touch points with West Virginia that we wouldn't just move in and then that would be a box checked, we've got a new business, and we'd be forgotten. We concluded we would be able really to collaborate with the local community, and that's turned out to be true. And we're over 20 years in. We announced our coming in 2001, so it will be 23 years this year.
Wow.
And it has been true every day, and it's been more successful than I ever could have expected.
That's true. And apparently the costs can you give us an idea of the differential?
Yeah, one way to look at it, our real estate costs here were 90% off. We don't pay 90% of what we would pay elsewhere. We pay 10%. Now that ratio may have changed over time, and bringing Orrick to West Virginia didn't cost the state or Wheeling a nickel. Now, we didn't want money; we wanted a fit. What did happen to raise the money? The Heritage Foundation redid the old stamping building down on South Main Street, for us, and to raise the money for that, several churches got together and lent the money into a fund that then refurbished the building, and then all that debt was repaid, and all the interest on the debt was repaid out of the rent that Orrick paid all those years, and Orrick still pays rent on it, and so somebody's making money, I hope, on that. Yeah, and it was seamless all the way through.
That's great. And again, thank you for thinking of us.
Yeah.
I'm sure that a lot of people in San Francisco, I don't mean to sound this way, and this is me looking down on myself, but had their eyebrows at Wheeling, West Virginia.
Well, this is something West Virginia needs really I think we could do better at taking stock of that. We are not, now, one of the side effects of Orrick moving its global operations center to Wheeling, West Virginia, was that I moved to West Virginia because I got reconnected to where I had my childhood, and it had been so positive for me. And I had two young children at the time, a 26-year-old and her just one older sister, were in elementary school, and I thought it would be good for them to have part of their growing up be here in West Virginia. And so I bought my first house here back in 2001. But I've come back to West Virginia. But the people in the rest of the country either don't know anything about us, or they knew things about us that aren't right.
Exactly.
And we are held in lower esteem than we should be. We're better than our reputation, but we're way better than our own sense of who we are. Every one of us as an individual has an awareness of our own value and our family and our close allies and so on. But we don't think of West Virginia as being as good as it is, as competitive as it is. One of the ways to think about who we are is think about some of the great success stories that come out of West Virginia. Those people are us, and they've gone on to do things. So, for example, more leaders of the largest law firms in the United States come from the state of West Virginia per capita than any other state. So the Reed Smith firm that started in Pittsburgh, became one of the great national firms, was run by Greg Jordan for many years from Warwood. K&L Gates also started in Pittsburgh, but a big international firm by Pete Kalis, also from Warwood. So they're not only just from West Virginia or just from Wheeling, but he was from West Virginia. The Sullivan and Cromwell, one of the most prestigious firms in New York City. The senior partner of that firm today, Raj Cohen, is from Charleston, West Virginia. And one of the most prestigious firms in the United States, Davis Polk, was founded by a man named John Davis, who was from Clarksburg, West Virginia. And then, of course, I ran Orrick for a long time.
There you go.
So that's who we are. John Chambers, who was recently in the news, who ran Cisco Systems for all those years, he was from West Virginia. It's all over the place.
Right, and his name gone to my head, Smith at Marshall University.
Right, who did Intuit. Right.
So,
right.
Well, I always, for the viewers, I always send out talking points, and one of the talking points we've kind of drifted into. What would you do to make West Virginia's economy better? And I always give my clients a magic wand. Let's ignore the legislature to something that you can do realistically.
Right now, I think in our state we'd have to ignore the legislature, but
they're going to look at your taxes now. You know
what I would do. What I would do is focus on two things. First, publicizing to the target market of people who might move a facility, might move an Orrick or a Williams-Lee or a health plan, which happened here in Wheeling. Who are those other businesses out in the world, in the United States, outside of the United States, and really deliberately comb through all of the businesses that are or might consider relocating and find the ones that are the best fits to West Virginia. And the other thing I would do is do a lot of research and then publicize, inform them about the reality of West Virginia, where we are positioned, and especially here in Wheeling, we're positioned within driving distance, easy driving distance, to about half the population in the United States. Yep. Right here, right? So if your facility is here, you can easily get whatever you're doing. If you're just putting in a warehouse, but if you're putting in the where all of the thinking goes on to run your business, which you can do in the 21st century. You don't have to be on Wall Street. You don't have to be in Silicon. It doesn't count. It doesn't count. So you can put it here, and you can have, for all practical purposes, a boundless supply of smart, hardworking people who would love to have a job they could do and stay here in West Virginia. You know, when WVU did that study some years ago, Dr. Gee commissioned McKinsey to do a study that found that we have one of the largest phantom workforces of any state in the country. People who are from West Virginia, who had to leave to get the kind of career they wanted, but who would love to come back if we had the jobs. And I don't know of any reason we couldn't have the situation we have here in Wheeling, where we have Orrick, Williams-Lee, and the health plan on Main Street here in Wheeling, that together employ over 2,000 people in safe, clean, high-paying, and sustainable jobs. Those jobs are going to be here forever. We can do that on one street in Wheeling. I don't know of any reason we couldn't do that in all of the cities of any significance in our state, but certainly the Clarksburgs and the Huntingtons and the Parkersburgs.
Procter & Gamble built that gigantic plant in the Eastern Panhandle.
Right.
And on the way out here, I played the game which is, what would your house cost in San Francisco? And I think you had about a 10 multiple on what it would be worth here.
It would be at least 10. Right.
I'm shocked that I love our state. I really do. And the last thing I want to see happen is hundreds and hundreds or thousands of people moving into Canaan Valley and spoiling it. Yet somehow, and for some reason they aren't. But again, Wheeling is located in such a nice place, and with Pittsburgh so close, we don't have the problems of the big city, but we got an airport and 3 iconic sports teams, all within an hour drive.
Exactly. I mean, we might as well. The driving distance from my house to the Pittsburgh International Airport is about the same when I had an apartment in New York for many years to the Kennedy Airport. So we might as well have an airport that's in the state of West Virginia, in addition to the ones we do have. But West Virginia offers more than low cost and enterprising, smart, hardworking people. It's a great place to raise a family. We have churches of every faith. We have excellent schools, especially here in Wheeling, but we have excellent schools in the state of West Virginia. We have parks. The weather is, compared to the rest of the country, quite good. I mean, we have our moments, but we have good weather. It's beautiful. Everyone, whenever you meet someone and tell them you're from West Virginia, oh, that's so beautiful. Okay, it is. So it's a great place to live. It's one of the reasons that I wanted to put the Orrick Center here, was I knew this would be a good place for our people. Once we opened, then this was where some number of our people would live, and this seemed to me to be a very good place for that. There's the story for West Virginia is so positive, but we have to overcome in the market's mind either ignorance, knowing nothing about us, or this stereotype they have of our people not being.
It's unfortunate.
Yeah.
Now, I've got to be the devil's advocate here.
Yes.
West Virginia has the lowest amount of labor force participation in the country. And it's, the curve is always like this, and it goes, West Virginia. How do we get that turned around?
Oh, more jobs. The more.
If you build it, they will come.
The more jobs that we have. I mean, we're sitting here at West Liberty University. The kids will graduate every year from here, and they have to find a job. And the more ambitious they are, the more reward, the more challenge they want in their jobs, the less likely it is they're going to be able to stay here, because we only have so many jobs. But the more Orricks you have, the more Williams Lees you have, the more Procter and Gamble's you have in our state, the more people will be engaged. But I think that is the least of our problems. We need the jobs. We'll fill them.
Great. One other, and this big change of subject here. One other thing I did want to discuss. You had run for office before in West Virginia. Unfortunately, didn't make it. What are your views on the politics, statewide or national?
Well,
this is being saved forever. So
yeah,
you better be right.
Well, I think we are in maybe the most interesting cycle ever. But it's certainly a very interesting time. And I think there are a lot of lessons that we have learned over the course of history and in recent history that should inform everyone who is voting in this upcoming election. And the first lesson is we all need to show up and vote. And we have a democracy, and we have a democratic republic, and we are able to control by our vote, one by one, who holds these offices that will have such an influence on our lives and our futures, our freedoms, or our lack of freedoms, and so on. And if we don't vote, we have no one to blame but ourselves, number one. Number two, if we don't really think about the issues, we have nobody to blame but ourselves. So on economic development, what we just talked about, if you want your state to do a better job of thinking about how to attract the jobs that we need in our state, if that's what you want our state to do, if you want them to really work hard and research and find the right fit, if you want them really to work hard and tell the story, tell the truth about West Virginia, don't exaggerate it, but tell the truth about it, we have to have the right people. And getting the right people is in our hands. We elect the people who lead all of these different functions of our government. So that's number one. Number two, I think recent times have taught us that character matters. It really matters.
To say the least. Yeah.
It does. I mean, we need people. What we're learning and all of the fussing we have now about what are the limits or lack of limits of the authority of our elected officials is the system is set up in a way that trusts the people who are elected to behave with integrity. It trusts them. These positions are not set up to define in very narrow ways the authority of a governor or a president or a mayor. That isn't how it works. We have broad principles, and historically in our nation, people have lived within them. There have been exceptions, and historically in our nation, the people who exceeded those limits were held to account and sent to whatever kind of penalty was appropriate. And we've learned here recently that maybe this Supreme Court doesn't think we should have such limits. And maybe they're right, maybe they're wrong, but that's what they've decided. And so we see very vividly that character matters. But really, it matters even with people who are behaving themselves. The kinds of decisions when we're reconciling competing considerations that our people in our elected offices make draw upon their character, their commitment to doing the right thing, not the selfishly best thing, but the right thing. So character really matters. And I think that's going to matter up and down the ballot. I mean, for me, the first place that's worth, obviously, is up for discussion. is who will fill the shoes of Robert Byrd and Joe Manchin in the United States Senate.
Mhm.
And I think every voter ought to think about it that way. We aren't just electing another senator. First of all, we only get two. Luckily, we get two with only 1.8 million people. But the seat that is up for election this year has been held for decades by the longest serving senator in the history of the United States, and then by another esteemed, incredibly effective senator, in my opinion, in Joe Manchin. So that's the seat that's open. So to whom shall we entrust this? And I think the answer is clearly Glenn Elliott, because Glenn Elliott is perfectly suited for this role. He's from West Virginia. He's grew up, educated here in Wheeling. He went off and had a career, including working for Senator Byrd.
Mhm.
He cut his teeth in when his initial foray into the world of work was to work in the United States Senate for Senator Byrd and learn how the Senate worked. Then he became a lawyer, and he had a practice. Then he came home to West Virginia and went to work in public service, becoming mayor and being quite successful as a mayor of Wheeling. And people right now are a little annoyed that we have to do all this street repair here in Wheeling. But when it's done, this is going to be a huge boon to economic development in Wheeling. But he's of another generation. He's a new generation. We need to send someone after this distinguished record that Senator Byrd and Senator Manchin achieved for us. We need to send someone to Washington to represent us who has new ideas, understands the new technology and all the new things, and who can be there for a long time. And I think Glenn Elliott is perfect. And he's a family person, family man here in Wheeling. I think he's ideal. I admire Jim Justice for a lot of things Jim Justice has done for Greenbrier County and the Greenbrier itself, and coaching the girls basketball team down there, and a lot of good things he's done. But I think right now it's time for a change. I don't think we need another person of my vintage or Joe Biden's vintage or Jim Justice's vintage.
Watch it.
Well,
My vintage. I'm teasing you.
Pete, are you running for the Senate?
No.
All right, perfect.
I know my place.
I don't think it's time for us to, I deny retirement.
Mhm.
I want to live my vibrant life. But I think when we get to these positions of public trust, that we need now new ideas.
Mhm.
We don't need teenagers, but we need new ideas.
Seasoned people.
Yeah, seasoned people who are not approaching their 80s, I think would be a good idea. So that's what I think. So that's what I think on that one. And I think in the governor's race, I think Steve Williams is the right guy for that job. He's proven himself as a mayor. He is a person of good character we can trust, and he's a West Virginian.
Mhm.
And so I would vote for him. And then on the presidential,
Everybody out there just lean forward.
this one is going to be such an interesting competition, an interesting test for America. Coming into 2 weeks ago, all of the polls were telling us that all of the Americans, or at least 70% of them, was unhappy with the idea that we were going to have two candidates in their late 70s running for president. We don't want either of these people. And they called it the double haters. But that wasn't really right. It wasn't about hating them. Maybe you do, maybe you don't. It was just about thinking they were too old. And the time had caught up with them, unlike you, Pete, unlike me. And so they wanted younger candidates.
Mm-hmm.
They wanted experienced candidates, but they wanted younger candidates. And suddenly, the Democrats have a younger candidate. And so now we're going to test, in part, how the American people feel about this, because they now have a younger candidate and one who is older. I think Kamala Harris is the right person for this time. It's in a way historically kind of a fortuity, because we were on a path for Joe Biden to be the Democratic nominee and to run to have a second term, and that would have been the traditional way this had played out. But then it turned out, for the reasons he explained, that he chose not to run, and his vice president was the person he suggested, and the Democratic Party came behind her, and now she's the nominee. She's 59 years old. She has a record of public service that prepares her in a way that is nearly ideal to be president of the United States. She was a prosecutor in a country that is very concerned about crime, very concerned on the border and in our cities, very concerned about this. She began her public service as a prosecutor, and she was known as a hard-nosed prosecutor. In fact, some people thought that she wouldn't fare very well in higher democratic politics because she was so conservative in her approach to enforcing the laws. She was elected Attorney General in the state of California, the largest state in our country. It's incredibly difficult to run and be elected. I was unable to get nominated for Congress here in West Virginia in one congressional district. She made it all the way to be nominated and elected Attorney General in the state of California, and was a successful Attorney General with great wins for the people of California and for the people of the country in terms of pharmaceuticals and fraudulent behavior by banks and all sorts of things. And then she was elected to the United States Senate, where she distinguished herself in these committees by asking meaningful questions of people who were up for approval for cabinet positions and the like. And then she became vice president. And in the course of 3.5 years as vice president, she's met all the leaders of all the countries around the world. She's learned, in addition to knowing how the Senate works and the federal government works, how big state government works, the most complicated of states, California, and how local government works, she now knows how government and international foreign relations works. And so she's very well suited. She's very forward-looking in her outlook. She's very positive about the future. She's very positive about the people of the United States. So I think she's a nearly perfect choice. And I think we all are. It is fortuitous. It is in our good fortune that at the moment Joe Biden decided he needed not to run, that there was someone there available to fill this role. And then we're going to test what the American people want. We'll see what the people of West Virginia want as they choose between Donald Trump and Kamala Harris. They will show us by who they choose in their voting.
That's great. Well, I want to thank you for your time. This was a terrific, one of the best conversations we've ever had on the show, which means you're probably going to get invited back. Okay, I'll have a scorecard.
Right.
We'll go down and see how
Great.
Your things.
Well, great. Well, it was a pleasure for me, Pete. Thank you for having me.
Thank you very much.
Okay.
And I'd like to thank you all. We'll be seeing you next week. I'm Pete Holloway.